Rob.
Tony. And I'm Jeff.
We're in gaming.
And that's you.
Hello gamers and welcome back to the end. I'm Rob, of course, or Warshack if you want to call me by my in-game name. And today we're going to go over some of the most underestimated cards coming into the old gods. When we first did our reviews of these cards, of course we couldn't play with them the time that we were doing the review with those cards, so we could only go off what we kind of had on paper and what we thought about and how we think those cards were going to perform based on what we interpreted Standard to look like when that came out. Obviously, with being unable to play with these cards, we couldn't really give too much insight, and therefore we were wrong on some. So I wanted to kind of go over the cards that were underestimated in a sense when going into the old gods, and have turned out to be really, really good cards and have impacted the game in a way that we didn't assume that they would. So without further ado, let's get into it. For Druid, we have no cards. We're going to start off with Hunter, and the first Hunter card we're going to go over, this is pretty quick. There's only a couple cards for each class that would kind of slid by us without us thinking they were going to be too great. Let's actually go into the old gods cards here. Is the Karen Grub. So essentially we looked at this card, we said it was going to be a 3-drop, 2/3, or 2/5. It's a beast, and it has no ability whatsoever when it comes out. It's just a 2/5 body that costs 3 mana. We're like, okay, well, the card, you know, in stat-wise, it's pretty good, but it doesn't really impact the field at all. It's actually been seeing a lot of play in mid-range to N'Zoth, or mid-range and Death Rattle Hunter decks at the moment, because if you think about it, Hunters have this turn 4 card called Houndmaster, and then if you give this card the Houndmaster's Battle Cry, it actually turns into a 4 attack, 7 HP creature with Taunt that you essentially spent 3 mana on. And then Houndmaster being a 4/3 on its own, that's pretty good. So the way this curves into the Hunter deck is really nice. Also, there's not a ton of great 3-drops for the Hunters besides like Eaglehorn Bow and Animal Companion. Those are the only really solid 3-drops that come to mind. So this guy really fits in nice there, and he's a huge body and definitely can make a lot of trades early on. So this guy kind of like slid past us, and definitely underestimated him. The next one is going to be the Mage card. It's called the Cult Sorcerer. So essentially you look at this card, it's a 2-drop, 3/2, so the stats are okay. But it says spell damage +1, which is really nice. And then it goes after you cast a spell, give your Cthulhu +1/+1. So people are like, okay, well this is of course going to go into Cthulhu Mage. But little did we know, it actually fits really, really nicely into Tempo Mage without even having Cthulhu in the deck. And that's due to the +1 spell damage. And as we know, mages cast a ton of spells over the course of the game, and just adding 1 spell damage onto that can make or break you sometimes. So on top of having maybe a Flame Waker out or an Azure Drake out, it really combos well. And I've seen a lot of players add, where is it? It's double Arcane Blast, I believe it's called. It's not the Mistle version, it's the Blast. It says double the spell damage to a creature, so instead of it doing 2 damage, it'll actually do 4 damage, and it only costs 1 mana. So he combos really well with that particular card, along with any other spell damage card. So I honestly thought the Cult Sorcerer would fit really nice into Cthulhu Mage, but it actually fits into Tempo, and it's almost found in every single Tempo deck. The next card is going to be from the Paladin class. We have the Rallying Blade. So essentially when we looked at this card, it had 3 mana, 3/2, so the same kind of stats as a King's Defender as a warrior, and that that weapon isn't played. But it says Battle Cry, give all your minions with Divine Shield +1/+1. So you're like, okay, well, normally max you have maybe 1 to 2 Divine Shield creatures on the floor or on the field, so it's not really that impactful. But with this new aggro kind of Paladin deck on the rise, where you have the Selfless Hero, you've got the Steward of Darkshire, you've got the ability to give Divine Shield with Argent Protector along with Argent Horse Rider already having Divine Shield. This just has a lot of synergies, and most of the time, if you can pan it out right, it's going to hit 2, 3, or even 4 creatures at a time with that +1/+1. And that's insane for it already having, you know, a 3 attack, 2 durability weapon for only 3 mana. So Rallying Blade, when we first looked at it prior to the Old Gods coming out, I said it wasn't going to be that great, and then it turns out that it's actually really, really good if you're going for that aggro sort of Paladin deck. The next card is the Forbidden Healing. If you see me looking over here, this is where we made our list, so I'm not, trying to stray away from you guys. Just making sure I get the cards all right in the correct order. It's Forbidden Healing. So as we knew, the Antique Healbot left us when Standard Mode hit, and we're like, oh, we definitely need healing. And Forbidden Healing, does fill that healing slot, but we didn't really understand how good Forbidden Healing would be. And as of now, 2 Forbidden Healings almost in every single Control Paladin deck on ladder you're going to find. Like, it has to be in there. Like, it's the people aren't like, give or take, one of them, possibly 2. It's 2. Like, people have stuck with 2, and it's a great card. And if you have 10 mana, it turns into 20 healing. It can be used on creatures. It can be used on your face. It can be used at any turn. So whether or not it's turn 10, turn 4, turn 6, turn 8, it doesn't really matter. And just the flexibility of this card is insane, and that's what makes it so very good. So yeah, when it came into it, people knew it was going to be good, but how good it was going to be was definitely underestimated. Our next one is going to be Priest, and then this is, my opinion, one of the most overlooked class in the game. People are like saying, didn't really, with it losing Light Bomb, it took a really big hit. But in my opinion, it's still very strong. Priest is it's a very strong deck. In my opinion, some of the, at least tier 2. If not very close to tier 1. So Shifting Shade was definitely overlooked by me and Tony, along with a lot of other people. And so they look at the stats, they're like, all right, it's a 4-drop, 4/3. So the same stats as a Shredder, but a creature doesn't come out. But instead of a creature coming out, you get a Death Rattle, copy a card from your opponent's deck and add it to your hand. If this said from your opponent's class, it may be a little bit worse, but the fact you're getting it from your opponent's deck is huge. This card has saved me and won me so many games so far, because every time this guy dies, you get that copy of your opponent's card out of their deck, which is good because their deck is most likely going to be the best 30 cards, that they could squeeze together to fill in that, foundation, that deck archetype they're going for. So whether you're playing against a warrior and you happen to get Brawl, you get a Gorehowl, you get a Malkorok, you get a Hellscream, you get their Golden Monkey. Like, it's just the amount of value that this guy can pump out is huge. Again, it's a little RNG because it's random, but for the most part, you're getting it out of their deck. So it limits it down from their class, which could be, Totemic Might if you're playing against a Shaman, to, getting that Lightning Storm playing against a Shaman deck, or, an Elemental Destruction, or a Thunderbluff Valiant, or a Fire Elemental. There's just the endless possibilities of this guy, and that makes him so very powerful. And his stats are good. He's a 4 for 4/3. I mean, if he was like a 4-drop, 3/3, questionable. But the 4 attack allows him to trade up to at least a 5-drop. So, pretty nice. The next one is going to be Rogue. And it is going to be, where is it? Shadow Strike. So, originally when looking at the old God cards, me and Tony actually thought Shadow Strike was a pretty decent card going into it, but if you'd maybe run 1 or 2 of these, we weren't sure. And a lot of other people when reviewing it said it was basically going to be useless because it has to deal 5 damage to an undamaged character. It costs 3 mana. It's really inefficient in comparison to like Prep, Fan of Knives, Evis. There's just a lot of other rogue cards that do a lot of damage for the cheap price of 0 to 2 mana. So it's 3 mana and it has to be undamaged was kind of like questionable, but now it's played at least one of these in almost every single Miracle Rogue deck, and it allows you to take out up to a 5-drop, sometimes even a 6-drop if you're talking about Sylvanas, with just 3 mana. And along if you have maybe a spell damage like an Ezra Drake on the field or a Blood Mage, pumping out 6 damage for 3 mana is pretty good. Also, if you're going for that like OTK combo and your opponent's at 30 health, you can actually use this on your opponent's face. Not recommending you do that if you can't, kill them in just 1 turn, but it's definitely, it's got some flexibility on it, which made this card pretty good. Plus, it looks really awesome. Next one is going to be Shaman, and this is a card that at first you may be like, okay, Rob, you're kidding, right? Primal Fusion, this is a joke, right? No, it's actually not a joke. This is 1 to 2 copies of these is found in most Totem Shaman decks, and you're like, Totem Shaman, you're kidding. Totem Shaman, you're kidding again, right? And I'm really not. With the rise of how many Shamans are on ladder, people have been playing a variety of different decks, and what has seemed to come to light is this particular mid-range Shaman deck that runs double Thunderbluff Valiant and actually runs 1 to 2 Primal Fusions. It also runs 2 Flame Tongue Totems, it runs 2 Mana Tide Totems, along with, Thing from Below, which makes you want to use your passive every turn, and on top of using your passive every turn, you've got Primal Fusion in there, which actually gives you benefit from having totems out, along with throwing Bloodlust in there. So it's like your totems can actually be utilized almost to their fullest, and having cards like this in there, like, it kind of eggs you on to want to build up that totem field to get that +1/+1 for each of your totems. And so let's say you have 2 to 3 totems on the field, giving a card +3/+3 for the cheap price of 1 mana that's pretty good. It allows it to trade up. It allows you to do burst damage. Granted, if you're not doing too well that game and you don't have totems on the field, it's kind of a dead card in your hand. But for the most part, mid-range Shaman, it's a very strong deck. Starts off really well in the game as long as your curve isn't horrible. You can play those creatures early on, which is basically the point of the deck. And then you can end up, turn 4 or 5 if you have that normally dead mana in your hand that you can't really utilize. You can throw in a Primal Fusion and really buff up a creature and make your opponent have to deal with that. So I thought it was going to be bad when it first came out. I didn't think it was going to be played. Little did I know it's actually found in almost some mid-range Shaman decks, but it's increasing. It also played in quite a few mid-range Shaman in the tournament recently over this past weekend. All right, so going into Warlock, some people said this card was actually going to be really good. In my opinion, I didn't understand how good it was until I was getting wrecked by it. So whether they play this card and play Power Overwhelming on it, and it has that Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Shadow Beast, so they throw the Power Overwhelming on it, it dies, and it just brings out another dude. And Possessed Villager comboed with the Councilman, it gives him +1 attack because it summons a new dude after this guy dies. It also combos really well with Knife Juggler. So for a 1-drop 1/1, definitely overlooked. They're like, yeah, he's a good card, but I don't know if he'll actually be a staple in every single Zoo deck. And if he is a staple, do you run 1 or 2? Every Zoo deck plays this guy. Every Zoo deck plays 2 of them. End of story. So definitely, in my opinion, kind of overlooked how good the Possessed Villager, or how much of a staple this card would be. So yeah. Heading into the Warrior class, Blood to Icar, people knew, again, people had a sense of which cards were going to be good, but how good they were going to be is, until we could play with them, we didn't know. And Blood to Icar is one of those cards that we kind of knew it was going to be good. We looked at this and said, okay, it's going to be ran in Patron, but little did we know it's almost running every single type of warrior, where you're running Pirate Warrior, you're running Tempo Warrior, you're running Control Warrior, you're running Cthulhu Warrior. Blood to Icar is in here, and this kind of follows the same path as the Ravaging Ghoul. Again, we looked at Ravaging Ghoul, we said, wow, this is going to be really, it's going to work really well with patrons due to the fact it does 1 damage to all other minions on the board, but little did we know how popular Zoo is going to be along with Aggro Paladin, and it actually works out really well, whether it's a field clear, whether it allows you to do combinations with Battle Rage, draw with Acolyte at Pain. There's just so many combinations Ravaging Ghoul can really come in clutch. And it's actually ran in, again, not only patrons. You can find this card in Cthulhu Warrior, Tempo Warrior, Control Warrior, and of course patrons as well, but for the most part, found in a lot of warrior classes, which kind of people overlooked at first. And then, again, Bloodhoof Brave. They looked at this card and said, yeah, he's going to be all right. He's a 4-drop, 2/6, taunt, and rage +3 attack. But again, this is kind of goes along the lines of the Ravaging Ghoul and the Blood to Icar. He's played in basically every single warrior deck, whether you're running, again, Tempo, Control, Cthulhu, or Patrons. Maybe not so much Patrons, but I actually run him in my Patron deck just because he works so well against, if your opponent, which are your opponents, which have been Shaman in the past. Wow, why am I stumbling here? Shamans, very popular on ladder, having taunt. Good, taunt with enrage, even better. That was what I was trying to get to. All right. We covered Warrior. Now we're at the neutrals. Disciple of Cthulhu. Let's go to him real quick. When this card came out, again, people knew he was going to be okay. But how good? Actually found in every single Cthulhu deck. You basically won't find a Cthulhu deck without 2 Disciples of Cthulhu in it. Granted, his stats aren't that good. He's a 3-drop, 2/1, so he definitely dies to, if you're going against a mage and he uses a Fireball, or I should say Fire Blast, the passive. If you're playing against a Rogue or a Druid, you kind of can just passive and kill it. But its Battle Cry, deal 2 damage, is actually really, really nice because that allows you to pick off, if they play a Knife Juggler early on, they have a high-level creature and you decide, you have a Wrath and you need to combo it down and kill it because it has 2 more health left. Really, really nice. I shouldn't really have to explain why deal 2 damage, give your Cthulhu +2/+2 is really nice. Again, it kind of replaces the Twilight Elder in my opinion, even though this is, again, a 3-mana 3/4. He doesn't have any actual ability that changes the field when he comes out. And also, the Disciple of Cthulhu can be comboed with Bran and actually deal 4 damage instead of that 2, because it'll hit the same target twice with 2 damage. So that's actually really nice. Corrupted Healbot. So people looked at this and said, yeah, it'll go in a priest deck. Death Rattle, restore 8 health to your enemy hero. So you can actually make this deal 8 damage to your enemy hero. But we didn't really look at this in terms of how it would pan out in a N'Zoth deck. And what I've been seeing recently is the Corrupted Healbot is played in N'Zoth Warlock and N'Zoth Paladin, and sometimes N'Zoth Priest. So it's not always in combination with the Soul Priest is Corrupted Healbot played. It also is played in other decks that don't run the Soul Priest but use this as the 5-drop 6/6 body, which is huge. If your opponent doesn't deal with the 6/6, it's going to trade with at least 1 to 2 creatures. It's going to deal a sizable amount of damage to their face. So definitely a card that was kind of only thought it was going to be played in the Priest class, but it's actually played in a few other decks and works really, really well. Heading into there's only 2 more cards that we're going to go over. So, Boogeyman. I'm just kidding. This card's trash. Sugoth the Slither. When they looked at this card, they said this card is way too late game, doesn't have enough attack, doesn't have enough HP, costs 9 mana. There's just no way this is going to fit into any of the decks. Currently, the meta is too quick, or too fast, I should say. And little did we know, it actually fits well into almost every single control deck, whether or not they're playing those or not. Depends on kind of the region you're in. I'm pretty sure I heard EU. This is a really popular card, or Asia. I'm not sure which one. Asia Pacific. Anyway. It has been popping up a lot. It was also played a tidbit in Control Warrior in the tournament over this past weekend, and the reason being is it can't be targeted by hero powers or spells, and a priest can't entomb it, warriors can't execute it, they can't shield slam it, they can't, polymorph it, they can't hex it. You have to trade creatures into this guy to kill it, unless you can get Sylvanas out, and Sylvanas can take him from your opponent. But for everyone else who doesn't play Sylvanas in their deck or doesn't have the ability to kill Sylvanas or have her at the time this guy is played, they have to use their face if they have a weapon or other creatures. And if you're playing against an aggro deck, their creatures normally have only between 2 to 4 attacks, so they're trading at least 3 to 4 creatures to just try to kill this one dude, which buys you probably enough time to be able to heal yourself back up or gain field advantage in some other way by playing other taunt cards. So there's by no means this guy is the best legendary to come out of the old gods. He's just one that people definitely overlooked and is not as bad as what people thought originally. And then the last card, N'Zoth. I think this goes for me and how we discussed this card in our review of the old gods cards coming out. Tony definitely said this card would see play and it would be really good. I, on the other hand, said this card is way too slow. You basically have to run a Battle Cry deck, or a Death Rattle deck, which is never going to happen. 10 mana, 5/7, the stats are bad, and it's just too late. And little did I know, every single deck archetype can make a N'Zoth deck, and it's actually pretty good. So I was definitely very, very wrong in the sense that me thinking N'Zoth wasn't going to be a card that was, they would build decks around N'Zoth. And as we know, N'Zoth Paladin, N'Zoth Priest, N'Zoth Warlock, there's tons of decks that run this guy. Very, very good, very consistent. And needless to say, I was very wrong at how N'Zoth and decks would pan out. Definitely underrated in my sense. Some players, of course, said how good he was going to be. We didn't know until he came out, but it turned out to be pretty good. So if I missed out on any cards that you guys think that were kind of underrated at first or, looked over and actually have turned out to be really good, let me know in the comment section below, as I would like to hear what you think I might have missed out on, which, again, it can always happen. I could definitely the whole video was looking over cards, so if I happen to look over a card while making this video, let me know in the comment section below. As always, if there's anything you'd like to add to what I've said, because again, I can't cover every single aspect of a card in these videos. I try to make them short, informative, to the point, and kind of get my own opinion in there. That would be great as well. Always look forward to reading them. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. So as always, guys, I'm Warshack, and happy whatever the hell day it is.